Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Hewitt and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. And you can check out our upcoming events on both connectingup.org and techsoupnewzealand.co.nz. Today, we welcome you to the webinar Digital Fundraising with Saoirse Rochford from Nation Builder. And just before we begin, just a bit of housekeeping today. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please just type them into your questions box and I should be able to assist you. Likewise, if you have any questions during the session, type those into the questions box and we'll have a Q&A at the end of today's webinar. This session is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the slides along with the recording towards the end of today. And before we start, I'd just like to remind you that there's a short survey that will be popping up at the end of today's webinar and we'd really appreciate any feedback. That's all from me. I will pass you over to Saoirse to get things started.
Awesome. Hello and welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? I think we're good now. Brilliant. All right. So fundraising in the digital space has become increasingly more important. Long gone, I feel like, are the days of big galas and fundraising events, and while we are starting to see that kind of come back a little bit post COVID or as we continue to get over COVID, the global pandemic has just truly increased the importance and the reliance that we have on digital fundraising. And so in today's session, we are going to focus on a couple of different things. So up first, we are going to be talking about defining your goals and if you have a timeline affiliated with those. We'll then move into some best practices on recruiting new donors and resoliciting existing donors if you have those. Then we're going to jump in to tactics for boosting your online fundraising operation as a whole. And then finally, we're going to close out talking about how you can leverage the power of your supporters and their networks with peer-to-peer fundraising as a whole. So up first is defining our goals. It goes without saying that I'm sure every organization here has a number of different goals, but today what we're focusing on is those fundraising goals. And so when we're thinking about the ability to set perfect targets, we'll call it, or goals in fundraising, you want to think about a couple of different areas. So up first is reviewing your financials from the past. What have you set as goals before in maybe similar campaigns that you've ran? Maybe it's end of year giving or a specific type of fundraising effort that you are doing for an issue that you care about as the organization, or it's just your overall fundraising. But ideally, you want to review those financials so that you can actually set yourself a benchmark and understand what it is that you are trying to surpass. Up next are your operational costs. So your operational costs are things that you would want to associate with kind of just the running of your fundraising mechanism. So how much are you paying for office equipment, for digital infrastructure, for staff time, things like that. Those are your operational costs. You then also want to think about if there are any contribution limits, if there are any legal ramifications to certain contributions from corporations, from if there are individual limits, and that's going to depend on your locality. So make sure that you do check any contribution limits that might exist when you are looking at setting those goals. Up next are those specific fundraising goals, right? So you've got that budget in mind, you've got your kind of goals, you've looked historically at what you've raised, and now you can move into some specific goals to orient around. So up first is the total amount of money that you're going to raise. This is a common indicator for a successful campaign. So for example, from date to date, your organization has raised $700,000. Another important one that you can think about is number of donations. And so when I'm talking about number of donations, I'm actually talking about the individual transaction. Some organizations use this as an indicator of the breadth at which they have resources for fundraising. It's also a really good one to think about when you are leveraging maybe in social media, your number of donations. Number of unique donations, or sorry, donors. This is how many unique individuals. So maybe I've donated to your organization 50 times. I would be considered as one unique donor. Unique donors are a really great way to show just how much support you actually have. You might have, 500,000 donors that are donating, $2 or $1, but you have a breadth of support. You have a large number of people. And then lastly, thinking about an average donation amount. These are really great ways to indicate that you have grassroots support, that it's not just, maybe grant money, it is actually individuals that care about what your nonprofit is doing, what your organization is actually doing. This is a great way to identify that. And it's also another really handy kind of informational bullet point for social media to be able to create graphics around the average donation amount. Another really common tactic that people have used in this is setting the average donation amount plus some. So what I mean by that is you can send out an email to say, the average donation amount is X, and then you can use custom logic, and we'll talk about this shortly, to actually amp that number up a little bit so that you can get people to incentivize them to donate more to your campaign. Okay. So, donor recruitment. To run the effective digital fundraising program, you need to remember that fundraising is actually more than just raising money. It's about understanding who your donors are and then providing them with personal and consistent communication. So, up first, let's talk about the different types of donors that you might actually have within your organization. One-time donors. These are people who have donated at least once but are not actively recurring donors. Recurring donors. These are people who make recurring, typically monthly donations through a recurring charge plan. So what I mean by that, right, they're not logging in every day at the same month to go in and make a donation. It's happening automatically in the background unless they actually go in and cancel it. Recurring donors are a really important part to being able to map out what your trajectory could look like as you continue to build out your donation infrastructure. Lapsed donors. So these are people that have donated, but maybe they haven't donated in the last 6 months or 9 months. The definition of lapsed is going to vary depending on organization to organization, but what we see most at Nation Builder is identifying anyone who hasn't donated in the last 6 months. So again, important for you to think about what that period would be in your organization, in your nonprofit, identifying is there a regular cadence that people maybe only donate annually? So maybe you're looking at lapsed donors are 18 months, right? Get into that conversation as a fundraising or a development team and make sure that you are agile in your ability to actually change what your lapsed donors would be. High dollar and major donors. So this is going to vary from organization to organization depending on what your average donation is amount. But in the general kind of tenor here, we're thinking about people who have the potential to give substantial amounts of money. These folks typically require a lot more one-on-one engagement and relationship building. And last but absolutely not least is fundraisers. These are people who raise money on your behalf, regardless of whether or not they've actually donated themselves. Some examples of this could be college students who actually can't afford to donate, but they have a really massive social media following, so they are able to actually kind of raise your profile without having donated themselves. Other people to think about here are wealthy, well-connected donors who maybe have already hit their philanthropic goals for the year. However, they have a network at which they can actually do fundraising on your behalf and host fundraisers with their own networks, which tend to have other large donors or the capacity to be large donors within it. So now that we've got an understanding of the different types of donors, let's have a look at who these donors are. Fundraising is ultimately about your people, and making the ask of someone to donate money to your organization should invite them to be a part of your mission. Your donors are unique, so you need to treat them accordingly. The images that we're seeing on the screen right now, are showing you the ability within Nation Builder's platform to actually get a 360 view. So on the left-hand side, we see Lewis Morton. We can see that he has signed up to volunteer, he's interacted with us on Twitter, he's donated $1,500, and he's recruited people. We're getting an understanding to see who Lewis is and how he's engaged with this. On the right-hand side, we are seeing Francesca Carr. She's sharing our content, right? She's out there and she is sharing this volunteer information, and she's recruiting people from her network to join. So she's brought in Roger Matthews. Sure, this is a testament, right, to have all this historic and holistic engagement data in one place. But it also actually speaks to that larger point, that each of your supporters and potential donors are individuals who have different engagement history with your organization. You need to make sure that you're acknowledging these engagements and communicating with these people in a very targeted way when you're fundraising. If you're just doing blanket emails to these folks, you're going to have a much lower engagement rate when it comes to the actual making of money from these individuals. So it's more than the money. Before you can actually get into the idea of making those targeted donation asks and speaking to people personally, we actually need to take the time to get to know who our supporters are and why they actually support your organization. Some questions to think about in this. What was it that actually got them interested in your cause? What led them to donate to you? Why did they do it? And can they actually help in other ways? Getting answers to these types of questions is going to take a little bit of time. I'm not going to tell anyone here right now that it's easy, that you can just do this overnight, but it is worthwhile. It is a major step in getting you to a place where you can really move beyond blanket, non-personalized fundraising asks and make those appeals actually feel as though they were crafted for the individual user, even when you are sending in mass comms. And that is the reason that it's so important, is because people are much more likely to give when they feel that the message is actually crafted for them personally, instead of being kind of just a faceless person on an email blast. I can't tell you the number of times I've received fundraising asks where it says "Dear friend." That's impersonal. That is not going to attract me to actually engage with the content in that email. So now we need to think about, how do we segment this? How do we actually think through the individuals? And so as you collect this information on people, on why they support you or who people are, where they live, etc., you can then begin to build segments based on these data points. Up first, there are two main buckets of segments that you can build into. One is your behavior, so action history. The other is persona, so think characteristics of individuals. So let's start with that behavior segment. So when I'm talking about action history, I'm talking about past donations, RSVPs, social media engagements, basically any tangible action that someone has taken with your organization. Why is this important? Because people who've taken past actions are more likely than those who haven't to actually donate. For example, we have run some aggregated data sets at Nation Builder to get an understanding for what does it look like when folks RSVP. And what we found was that donors who RSVP for an event give on average 34% more than those who haven't RSVP'd. Another example here is actually resoliciting past donors. The biggest indicator, shock horror here, is that someone will donate if they've donated before. So tap into this, make sure that you're doing it in a timely manner, but it is a really good indicator if they have donated historically. Also, you can think about making incremental asks of your past donors. Maybe they gave $25 6 months ago, and now this time you can ask them for $50. So those are just some ideas to think about as it pertains to that behavior, that action history that you might have on your donors and your supporters. So now if we move into this persona group, when you think about those segments based on persona, you want to be thinking about these are like intangible characteristics that are associated with people. They can be their interests, their age, some demographics you have, things of that nature. An important stat on the persona front is how long people have actually supported your organization. What we found at Nation Builder is that people who have supported organizations for 2 or more years, so they've been involved, they are on your email list, they've attended events, those folks on average give 150% more than newer supporters who've been around for about a month. So people who've been around longer are substantially more likely to donate than new supporters. Keep tabs on how long people have been around, right? Think about it. How long has an individual been in your database that you've been engaging with? How can you then tailor a message to them based on the length of time they've been involved with you? Some other things to keep in mind here are things like, have your donors expressed interest in a specific issue that your organization cares about? Have they lent any unique skills to your organization? Did they volunteer? Did they help out at an event? Maybe they actually gave you some graphic design skills or helped build out your website. Do they have a large reach on social media so that they could fundraise on your behalf? These are all part of that characteristics that you can actually really start to make personalized campaigns around for fundraising efforts. So now moving into communicating. A thing I see all the time with nonprofits is this focus on bringing in new donors. And in doing so, sometimes actually let keeping in touch with their existing donors fall by the wayside. This is a big mistake, and you really want to try and avoid it, as one of the biggest indicators that we just talked about, right, is that someone who has donated before is more likely to donate again. Making donor retention a key part of your fundraising strategy, partly because they have the potential to give more, and also because you want to acknowledge these people for supporting your organization financially. Within Nation Builder, you've got the tools you need to actually stay in communication with your donors. At first, we have the concept of email blasts. Email blasts serve many purposes and are a tried and true form of communications. You can send out follow-up emails to people who just maybe attended an event or signed a petition. But you can include in that a link to a donation page, or send out a campaign specific or an issue specific donation page to people who've indicated that they actually care about that particular issue. Email automations. So this is extremely valuable when you are trying to communicate with people along like a predefined journey that you've already set for them. So for example, if you're trying to convert one-time donors into reoccurring donors, an email series is going to be the best way for you to make that case to have them time and time again actually tune into your content and engage with informations. So text blasting, we have a number of partners that we work with in the APAC market for this. And this is really handy when you are thinking about kind of like single day fundraising pushes that you have, or if you have a deadline that you're trying to meet. It's kind of really about creating urgency. I would make sure that when you're thinking about a text strategy, you are really kind of aligning it with, either a day of giving or a crisis type communication strategy. You do not want to be regularly texting with those folks. You want to use it very intentionally. So into our online fundraising tactics. We now understand who our donors are and the importance of actually sending those personalized communications to both potential and existing donors. So now we're going to walk through some of those most commonly used tactics for making donation asks across the nonprofit industries. Some basics. So it is pretty undisputed fact that online fundraising is by far the most effective way for your fundraising efforts. It goes without saying, right? But having a clean and user-friendly donation experience on your website is a baseline expectation. First, you want to make sure that your donation processing on your website is seamless and is easy. The last thing you want are any technical hurdles, basically, that would prevent willing donors from actually donating. You also want to provide your donors with access to a mobile responsive donation page across multiple channels. What I mean by that is think email blasts, social posts, websites, all of that. You need them to be able to access that on their cell phone. So your website has to be responsive. You also really want to make sure that your donate button is prominent across communications where your call to action is to donate. Finally, you want to capitalize on any current events or rapid response situation with branded donation page. So for example, if an issue your organization cares about is mentioned in the news, you could potentially spin up a branded donation page with your logo that is specific about that event. There are, a number of other things that you can think about in doing this, but what the whole kind of nuts and bolts of this is, if there is a moment in time where your potential supporters and your potential donors are interested in one issue and it's authentic to your nonprofit and organization to actually engage with that issue, being able to spin up branded websites that pages, donation pages that have an affiliation with that content can be really, really powerful. So, tailoring your fundraising asks. Up first, adjusting your calls to action. Why should people donate? Why should they donate right now? You need to make sure that you tailor and diversify your calls to action. If someone has been on your email list for 2 years, they're going to start to realize that you are sending the same message to them. It's important to make it contextually important and relevant to them in that moment and diversify the language with your calls to action. You also want to customize your messaging. People who've indicated that they care about a particular issue, for example, should get a donation ask with the messaging that your organization cares about on that issue. You also want to recognize your donors' past engagement as a way to acknowledge their support for you, and also a reminder about why they came to support you in the first place. And finally, you want to meet people where they're at. If people are donating online, especially on their phones, again, you want to make sure that you have donation pages that are responsive and optimized for mobile devices. Meeting people where they're at also includes accommodating people who may be unwilling or unable to donate online. You want to make sure that it's clear how that you can submit a check donation, excuse me, or include instructions and potentially a link, right, to remit forms on your donation page. So when we're thinking about this, we want to think through the ability to optimize our online, online fundraising. And right now, or at least for the past kind of 18 months, a lot of our actions were limited to online only. So we needed to get pretty creative with how you could engage supporters when it came to fundraising asks. So creating urgency. I said this in the last slide, but it is worth reiterating. No matter what your method of communication is, always make the case for why people should donate right now. Why? That is so important, because if you can communicate that message, that urgency will come across to the people who will potentially be able to give you money. Pledges. Pledges are a commitment to donate a specific amount of money at a certain time. They're very common in the nonprofit world and are extremely helpful when you have fundraisers. Supporters that are asking their networks to make a pledge to your organization only increases the likelihood because they're hearing it from someone they trust, not just an organization. A pledge also gives your organization the ability to follow up with folks in a specific time period so that they can actually donate the amount that they had said. Text keywords. This could be a great way to have people engage with your fundraising strategy right from their phone in an immediate way. What you can do here is, if you are working with any of Nation Builder's partners that integrate with our software, you can go ahead and actually send a text keyword to identify an individual that would then have an auto response, which would give them the link to donate. So for example, if your organization was, saving animals, you could have a text keyword that was puppy. And when they texted the word puppy, they would get an auto response with a link for them to donate. Up next is personal fundraising pages. These are a really important way to distribute leadership within your community, or said another way, crowdsource donations from your individual supporters' networks. These pages actually allow for your supporters to set up their own fundraising goals for your organization and then track progress toward meeting that goal. You can also create a friendly competition among fundraisers using leaderboards on your website if you are using Nation Builder. And last is virtual thankathons. There are a few things in life that are as gratifying and heartwarming than receiving an unexpected thank you for something that you've done. You can do this for your donors with an out of the blue thank you call. A virtual thankathon, you can go ahead and you can create a list of recent donors and have your staff or volunteers that you have call and thank them for their donations. This actually sometimes even results in more donations from your past donors. It's really worthwhile to actually thank the people who are donating to your organization in, yes, the normal fashion that I know that some people on this call already do, but making it a part of, maybe it's a monthly thing that you do as volunteers. It's a great way to kind of bring your community together, as well as also actually getting some fundraising dollars in the door. So thinking through, it's not just about the money, right? This is about also deepening your relationships. As you continue to grow your donor base from the supporters that have engaged with you, there is serious value in deepening your relationship with these donors through more in-depth and creative engagement. Up first, thinking about leaning on your community leaders. These can be volunteers, these can be, elected officials or prominent figures within your community, or even potential constituents who have strong ties to the community. If you are leaning on them, they already have relationships that you can actually start to authentically create, right? You are using basically a trust, an influencer model, where you're identifying folks that align with your organization to then make those fundraising asks on your behalf. Hosting virtual events, right? There is a major value in having a captive audience. And even now, even more so now, where in-person events are still kind of just trickling back. You want to think about maybe co-hosts who can bring in new donors, new supporters, maybe pulling from those community leaders we just talked about. You also want to be able to encourage people to share their stories. Learn about their backgrounds, their experiences, the opinions that actually drove them to participate with your organization. It's really important, and we talked about this right at the top, right? But gathering that information and truly understanding people is going to ensure that when you're communicating with them, you're doing it in a very personal manner that is hard to just disregard. Speaking of personal, be more personal in your outreach. Break through the noise of mass communications. Communicate with people in a way that is tailored to them with a personal ask. Okay, so the last piece in this section is the power of reoccurring donors. Whenever it is possible, try to encourage people to donate on a reoccurring, typically monthly basis. Once you have infrastructure set up to accept reoccurring donations, people who opt for these reoccurring donations will have their card charged for the same amount monthly until they cancel, or if you decide to end that on their behalf. Whichever of those is kind of the way out of that reoccurring. This is a great way to secure a more steady stream of income of donations, and reoccurring donors typically have 2 to the 3 of lifetime value of one-time donors. 2 to 3 times is massive when you are talking about a reoccurring payment. Excuse me. Other thing to note here is that reoccurring donations aren't always about raking in as much money as you can. Many people who are unable or unwilling to donate large sums of money to your campaign may honestly opt in to giving $10, $5, or $1 a month in reoccurring donations, right? And that's not just if you're just running different campaigns. You can do this as a way to do kind of monthly sustainers for your organization at all times. There is power in doing it in that campaign format where you have specific campaigns that run throughout the years where people are reoccurring donors of that particular campaign you're running. But there's also a lot of value in actually doing it throughout the entire life cycle of your organization. Excuse me. Okay. Last section. I hope everyone's still with me. We've been in it now for about 30 minutes. I'm excited to hear some of your questions. So we are going to round out today's webinar with peer-to-peer fundraising. Nation Builder's organizing philosophy is centered around empowering your community and supporters to not only participate within your organization, but also to act as leaders within their own communities on behalf of your nonprofit. We've built our platform around this philosophy so that you can equip your supporters and your donors with the tools that they need to lead when it comes to peer-to-peer fundraising. Recent studies have found that 84% of people trust personal referrals over organizations' communications. So peer-to-peer can be massively more effective than other types of fundraising asks in many instances. We found at Nation Builder that 5% of your supporters will do 80% of your outreach, your community-driven outreach. So with those facts in mind, you want to be sure to have a system in place that allows you to track your current peer-to-peer fundraising and recruitment efforts. Any peer-to-peer program is only effective if their supporters are actually energized and your organization has a robust data tracking system in place. Both of those are required. You also want to have the data you need to effectively target donors who have a high propensity to become a peer-to-peer fundraiser. These, again, we've talked about this a couple of times, but these might be folks who have that larger social media following, or they've donated in the past and they've demonstrated some type of support through volunteering or through donating historically for your organization. So when you are thinking about the ability to cultivate anyone who could be an ambassador for your organization, you can also think about the option to create a social media ambassador program. So chances are you've got at least a few folks that support your nonprofit, excuse me, that have maybe a substantial reach on Twitter, as indicated by the number of followers that they have. So as you can see in this screenshot right here, this is within Nation Builder's platform. I am looking for the number of people in my database that have Twitter following of greater than or equal to 5,000. And they've donated at least $50 in the most recent calendar year. This is just another example of how having an integrated database can help you identify strategic segments of your audience. One thing to note here for those of you who weren't in the past couple of sessions, Nation Builder is giving you infrastructure. Nation Builder does not provide data, so we are giving you the infrastructure. This would be your data that you would put into the platform, and then we will be able to help you actually then engage with it and segment your audience. So you want to set these ambassadors up for success. Anyone who indicates that they are interested, you should be able to reach out to them with specific content and donation page links so that they can share with their networks for maximum impact. You can also track which social media ambassadors are bringing in the most donors by using the recruiter functionality within Nation Builder. This is key. Make participating in this program easy. It has to be easy. You want to give them talking points or pre-drafted social media content. You want to provide them with assets and images that you want them to share. And you also need to send them reminders. You and your organization is not going to be the only thing on their mind. So you need to make sure that when you need to drive folks out, that you are able to do that by sending them and reminding them that they've already got that collateral. You just need them to post it on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. So what does that look like in practice? Up first, you want to make it easy to share donation pages with what we call social share prompts. So whenever someone makes a donation on your website, you should provide them with the opportunity to share the support that they just gave for your nonprofit, as well as a link to that donation page directly to their social media accounts using that social share prompt concept. So you can see that right there with the thank you for contributing. These social share prompts are messages that acknowledge that people who are sharing, or sorry, people who are donating can get celebrated for that, right? They can start a conversation with their own community. They can share what they're excited about. What you can see right here is that I am sharing a tweet to say that I just donated to Puppies for All to make sure that you send $5 a day to help puppies find a home. That's pre-drafted content, right? You can pre-draft that so it will populate automatically, or you can let people write their own message. It really is up to you. Excuse me. Up on the right-hand side is a personal fundraising page. So I mentioned this earlier on in today's conversation, but personal fundraising pages and leaderboards give supporters so much agency over how they actually can decide to fundraise for your organization. And it allows them to clearly visualize the impacts that they are having for you. So what you're seeing here, this is my personal fundraising page for fundraising for puppies. And I've got a little bio about myself. I've got my headshot, and then I've got this goal. I am raising $10,000. You can see here that I've reached, I'm getting very close to it. I'm at 8,600. And then there's the button right there to donate on behalf of Social Rochford. It's really easy to configure this in Nation Builder, and it's a program that we see customers from the nonprofit space to the political space to small businesses using. And it's just so valuable to actually distribute leadership to your supporters and the folks that could potentially actually donate on your behalf. With all of that, I have finished. That is my content. So I would love to just do a quick recap. So we started off with defining your goals, specifically thinking about how do you determine a budget? What fundraising goals do you actually want to set? And do you have any important deadlines that you need to kind of isolate before you set the final budget and timeline? We then moved into best practices on recruiting new donors and resoliciting existing donors. We talked about different types of donors, the importance of having a holistic understanding of who your donors are and how they've been engaging with your campaign, and best practices to recruit new donors and retain existing ones. After that, we covered some recommended tactics for boosting your online fundraising operation. So things like having that mobile optimized donation page, some recommendations on tailoring your fundraising asks, and different mediums to communicate with your people. And finally, we just closed out talking about how you can leverage the power of your supporters and their networks with peer-to-peer fundraising, specifically covering strategies around social media ambassador programs, social share prompts, and personal fundraising pages. So with all of that, I would love to hear from folks in the audience. Jane, do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you very much. We do. Mary is asking, I've been trying to focus on monthly donors and I like the layout of become a monthly sponsor first. However, how do you manage about having too low an amount for monthly but want one-offs to pick a larger amount?
How do I manage? Oh, okay, yeah. So I think what you're saying there is having a pre-selected amount on a donation form that you would want to be variable dependent on whether or not it was a reoccurring donation versus a one-time donation. I'm just going to go with it. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I think that's what you meant. Yeah.
Cool. So there's a couple of things that you can do with that. If you are using Nation Builder, when you are creating a donation page, you will have the option to, like when you're filling out your form to create the page, to actually select which one you want highlighted. There is another layer there that you can go into, and if you are using Nation Builder's platform, within the template, within the like HTML of your website, you can create some custom logic to identify, like, I want it to be, green when green's a terrible color, but I want them to be whatever color it is to highlight the specific optionality if you have the two tabs. So like one would say one-time donations, the other would say reoccurring.
Great,
I hope that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Bridget, I'm curious about recording numbers of Twitter followers in a CRM as this is not a static figure, is it possible to wash this data against something for accuracy?
Yes, so that is not a static figure. So with Nation Builder's integration with Twitter, we are pulling in publicly available information. So if someone has interacted with your Twitter account, your organization's Twitter account, you will be getting we run it as a background job. So that would update every 18 hours from Nation Builder CRM point. If you are doing it manually, that will, that's tough. I don't know of any services currently that would provide updates like that. It would be a pretty manual process.
Thank you. Yep, I think that answered Bridget's question. That looks like it's it for the questions at the moment. But thank you, Saoirse, that was great. If anybody has any more questions, there's still a few minutes to get them in. Or if anybody, as always, has any questions after the session, do get in touch with us or with Saoirse and she'll be able to help you out. Somebody was just asking again if they will be receiving a copy of the slides. Yes, I'll be sending those out at the end of today, along with all contact details, and I'll put a link in there to the Connecting Up website where you can get the discount for Nation Builder if anybody doesn't have it yet. So thank you very much, Saoirse, that was great. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And do take a couple of minutes to fill in the survey at the end, that'd be really appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks,
Brilliant.
Saoirse.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.